Hello there, you weird geeks and nerds and zombies. Are there zombies watching? I hope there's zombies watching. My name is Nakai Walker, also known as Wally the Programmer by all of my close friends. Don't worry, those close friends are real and totally not imaginary. I don't make that much YouTube videos. I typically do make animation videos on my other channel called the ToonScape, which I do think you should go check that out. And the main reason why I'm making this is because several essay YouTubers such as The Take are doing the one marvelous scene thing that they did for Endgame, but for Game of Thrones. And I figured, hey, I want fame and publicity, I have to feed my ever expansive, fragile ego somehow. I love Game of Thrones. And one of the many reasons why I love Game of Thrones, which in all honesty is a bit irrelevant to this video, is because it's the first nerd-related franchise, for lack of a better word, that I've consumed without knowing anything about the source material. When it comes to movies such as the Marvel Cinematic Universe or any DC-related content, I'm typically very familiar with the source material, especially when it comes to Marvel, because I was a huge Marvel fan back in the days, especially when it came to Deadpool and Spider-Man, especially Deadpool. Deadpool's my boy. He's my homie. He's my best friend, my only friend. But Game of Thrones is something that I was relatively unfamiliar with. I wasn't even aware that there was any source material that the show is being based off of, which is written by the legendary man himself, the savior of all humanity, the second coming of Jesus Christ himself, George R.R. Martin, which I have no idea what the two R's stand for. Probably stands for Red Rover. Yeah, George Red Rover Martin. And that's his name. That's his official name now. Even if he comes out and tells us what the RR stand for, I don't care. That's his name. George Red Rover Martin. That's a name that you can respect. So, in spirits of the best of Thrones motif that video essay YouTubers are doing, I decided to review one of my favorite episodes. And on the surface, it may seem cliche which episode I'm going to review. I was originally considering reviewing the very first episode of the entire show, Winter is Coming, or the very last episode of the first season, Fire and Blood, which is ironically and thematically the two words of House Stark and House Targaryen, and also ironically fitting the theme of the book series, A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the words of House Stark, Winter is Coming, which is thematic to ice, and the words Fire and Blood, which is House Targaryen, which is thematic of fire. But the episode I decided to review was Season 1, Episode 9, also known as Baelor. For those familiar with this, with the show, this was the episode where Ned Stark dies. And like I said earlier, this may seem cliche at first, but hear me out. This to me is just important. This is not just important to the plot. It's important to the future of storytelling, possibly forever. And you'll see why in a bit, even though to some probably more intellectual, it might seem a bit blatantly obvious where I'm going with this, but just bear with me. This is One of the first videos I ever had with intense dialogue. So, to recap, I have no idea how to structure videos. Okay, to recap, basically, what happened in this episode, around this time, spoiler alert, by the way, at this point, we're reviewing random episodes for the final episode for the final season of the entire show, right? We're like, at this point, you should know that spoilers is coming. I hate how other YouTubers feel like they need to say this. It's like, should be obvious, proceed at your own risk. But whatever, moving on. Basically, Baelor is the penultimate episode of Game of Thrones' first season. And it was written by one of the most, celebrated and hated screenwriters at the same time. Our good boys, D&D, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, which D.B. Weiss must probably stand for Dick Butt Weiss? Yeah, Dick Butt Weiss. I'm just giving everyone names now. And it was directed by a man named Alan Taylor. I have no idea who Alan Taylor is. That's just probably just a person. I don't know. Yeah. So basically, at this point, Ned Stark, our good boy, our main character for the entire first season, he's currently in prison and he's being accused of high treason, and which the treason was that he revealed that, well, he didn't reveal per se, but he explicitly stated that Joffrey was an illegitimate bastard made out of incest of all things. Dear God, this show is insane. I don't know how my parents were allowing me to watch this with them. I'm 17, by the way, so this is probably why the video structure and video quality is going to be absolute shit. So, yes, Joffrey's a bastard, an incestuous bastard. And therefore, he's not the rightful heir to the late king, Robert Baratheon. And apparently simply stating that fact, whether it's true or not, is treason, even if there wasn't evidence, which there was minimal evidence, but still is kind of blatantly obvious. Like, you really have to look at his physical features, his hair, if you really want to get into genetics. God damn, I'm a nerd. Okay, so now he's in prison, and being that he got arrested, his oldest legitimate child, Robb Stark, he ended up just starting to wage a war, wanting an independent North. And he would probably rule the North, maybe. I'm not exactly sure what his plans were after he won, because he kind of rebelled to, save his dad. But, what if he did succeed in saving his dad? Would you want to rejoin the rest of the kingdoms of Westeros? I don't get it. It doesn't matter. So, basically, why I like this episode is predictably because Ned Stark dies. And this isn't simply because Ned Stark was a beloved character, one of everyone's favorite characters. This wasn't because this death was out of the blue. I knew long before I actually started watching the show that Ned Stark was going to die. I've heard about it several times. And it still shocked me way more than the Red Wedding did, to be honest. It is not just because Ned Stark was one of the main protagonists, but for the first season, he was the main protagonist. And this ties right back into how I feel like this episode has forever changed the way we tell stories. For so long, we simply depict our main protagonists with a lot of plot armor. We make sure that they live to see the end of their story. And if they don't, that's like at the very end instead of like, halfway through. And around the time of Ned Stark's death, there wasn't really any other main character that we could feasibly consider to take up the mantle of main character. And so from there on, after Ned Stark's death, the show no longer had a main centralized character. And even into season 8, which is quite possibly the most hated season in the entire series, even though I personally think it's okay. My least favorite thing about it is the fact that my favorite character of all time, the Night King, was killed in such a untimely fashion. I mean, judging by the whole fire and ice thing that they're going with in the new season, I'm not mad that the Night King died in episode 3, but simply how he died. And it's not just the fact that Arya killed him. It was just really more like he didn't get to do much, physically. I mean, he was doing a lot, but he didn't get to do much. It's a bit contradictory, but it doesn't matter. But going back on track, remember, I am a 17-year-old child. I do not know how to structure this properly. The reason why I consider this to be my favorite episode, because it just completely just subverted my expectations in a way that kind of just set Game of Thrones apart. I knew once Ned Stark died, and not even before the last episode, like the last scene of the last episode of the first season, or even the last season, as soon as I realized like how soon he died compared to other protagonists and other stories, I realized that I was dealing with a whole new beast. And I think it caused a huge ripple effect. And I think the biggest ripple effect would, I guess, be Infinity War. Now, unlike most people who watch movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, also known as the MCU, I'm a lot more critical and skeptical of the film series, primarily because I'm a huge fan of the source material, like I've said earlier, and I feel like a lot of characters in the MCU hasn't been really handled right, especially Spider-Man and Black Panther. I feel like they've been dealt a really crappy card. And I don't even think we need to get into Captain Marvel. That's just, I'm not a religious person, but seeing Captain Marvel, I'm like, this is Satan's work. But that's irrelevant. The point is, being that I was a lot more critical, what happened at the end of Infinity War, when Thanos got the upper hand and snapped half of the universe out of existence, shocked a lot of people. It didn't shock me as much, but it still shocked me. And the reason why it shocked me was simply because in the source material, the Infinity Gauntlet, what was it? Like a story arc? It was a crossover event, like one of the biggest crossover events of its time. Or was Secret Wars the biggest cross? I don't know. I don't know which one came first. I think Secret Wars came first. It doesn't matter. But Thanos in the comics was able to snap his fingers and get all the Infinity Gems, which in literally every other Marvel universe, they're called the Infinity Gems, except for in the MCU, because I guess Infinity Stones sounds so much cooler. It does, a little bit. But he already got his hands on the Infinity Gems, put them in the Infinity Gauntlet, and snapped life out of existence way before the main plot even started. And if memory serves me well, the vast majority of the main protagonists who were featured in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline did not die in the snap. And so I guess it threw me off at the end. Not only they allowed Thanos the victory, because I felt like, okay, this is the third Avengers movie. They're going to find a way to defeat Thanos, but a lot of people are going to die in the process, you know? This was it just threw me off. And I felt like, crap, Marvel had huge balls, like huge cojones to just make this move. Especially knowing that the majority of the fan base are normies who don't read comics, or basically people who haven't consumed media that takes huge risks such as this. And the MCU is one of the biggest franchises in, like, for right now, for our time. And the other biggest one is Game of Thrones. And so as soon as I saw Baylor, the end of Baylor, I noticed the same thing. The same exact thing didn't happen. The main character of Infinity War didn't die like halfway through the movie, because again, there was no real main character. The closest thing to that would be both Iron Man and Thor, but there was no main character. However, what the similarities that did appear was the simple subversion of narrative storylines. Because we all know the typical story. We all know the typical hero's journey. We all know eventually at one point the main protagonist has to defeat the antagonist and learn from their mistakes and learn, like, along the way. But however, in this, their failure at the end of the story to defeat the antagonist is where they learn the mistakes. And Ned Stark's failure to to properly combat and defeat the antagonist for that season and a few seasons afterwards would be Joffrey Baratheon. But I guess you can say his main antagonist was within him, which is his honor. Which his honor was just so, so overwhelming and consuming that he was even willing to kind of throw shade at Jaime Lannister for backstabbing the Mad King, even though Jaime Lannister saved countless lives in the process. Which I found to be a douche move from Ned, but still fit perfectly in his character. So, overall, in this extremely long and, quite frankly, unorganized video, the reason why episode 9 of season 1, Baylor, is so important to me has nothing to do with the story itself, but just simply what it has to do with storytelling forever. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and if you don't mind, if I could just have a blow-up sex doll, that would be pretty nice. Thank you. Goodbye.